order, and it looks like it's 10:03 a.m. Caution to the board members, please keep the microphone muted till you're ready to speak. So with that, we'll go ahead into the item B, the roll call, and I would ask Ms. Delia Luna to call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. James Graves. Dave Yelovic.
Here.
Claude Lujan. Ms. Lujan, can you unmute your mic?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Jerry Bittner, Acting Presiding Officer.
Here.
And we are waiting for Mr. Morris. We don't have a quorum right this minute, but hopefully he'll log in and then we can proceed. Thank you.
And Delia, and of course, Mr. Bittner, Acting Presiding Officer, thank you again so much for pinch hitting, because we call at the last minute because Mr. Compion is typically here, but we appreciate you stepping in, and we can proceed, and hopefully Mr. Morris will be able to join us.
Great. Okay, with that, I'd like to move on to item C, which is the approval of the minutes of the last meeting, June the 30th, 2021. I, at this time, would ask for a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from June.
I'll
So,
move.
Mr. Bittner, and I'm sorry to interrupt again, I did not announce who I was, Mary Winston, TDLR. The one difference in us not having a quorum or having a quorum is that we can't take a vote. So we will have to pass on
Okay.
this agenda item. And team will have to make note for the next meeting that we had to pass on this one. And at the next meeting, we will, if we have a quorum, have to vote on 2 sets of minutes.
Okay. We could move on to item D, public comment. I don't believe that there were any public comments for this meeting. Okay,
No, sir, no public comments.
very good. We'll move on to item E, staff reports then. And at this time, I'd like to ask Ms. Lisa Hudak to give us a report from the licensing division.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Hudak, Licensing Manager. And I'd first like to tell you about some new staff that we hired on July the 15th. We have Megan Tucci and Linda Williams. They are both, actually, I'm here at the office at the EOT building, and they're here with me. They're off to a great start. They're starting with electricians right now, but we will get them going on air conditioning as well. They're doing a great job. Very proud to have them on my team. And then for the statistics, I've listed fiscal year 2020 and August 2020 to July. At the time of this report, of course, we didn't have the August numbers ready. So almost a full year, but the total population is at 17,386 for the contractors. Registered technicians is at 28,224. Certified, we are at almost 4,600 for the population. And then the total of all combined, we are at 56,207. And that's with the licenses, certifications, and registrations. Do y'all have any questions so far on the numbers?
This is Dave Yelovic. I was just curious, as far as looking forward, in the state of Texas and with the amount of people moving here, are the number of licensees increasing more and more? I see the last year's 2020, but let's say over the past 10 years, are we keeping up with licensees and for the needs that will be anticipated 5 years from now? Or are we seeing some things like in other areas, plumbers, electricians, other technical trades where licenses are decreasing due to retirements of some older licensees?
Honestly, they're still keeping us pretty busy. It's the numbers haven't drastically changed, decreased or increased. They're fairly consistent. The certifications slowed down some because of the change in the law, but the contractors, it's pretty steady. It's, we're not seeing a huge difference.
I know there's been a very large push as far as trade schools and things across the state and actually across the country to recruit more folks into the trades. And I was wondering where we were standing on that topic as far as the workforce and training.
Um, Mr. Yelovic and Lisa, Mary Winston, TDLR. Great questions, Mr. Yelovic, and apparently you definitely have your finger on the pulse of the industry, and several of them, because you're right. We have a lot of industries, and actually we do gather statistics on what's the median age of licensees in different fields. I don't know if we'll be able to do a 10-year trend for you, but we can definitely do a several-year trend and get that back to you maybe by the next meeting. And that's one of the questions that we ask for strategic planning. Where do you see yourself like in 5 years? What is going to change? That's not exactly how we ask the question, but it's the general gist of it. What is going to be affecting the industry? And one of those things is members of the industry possibly aging out. And you're right, there is a push not only in Texas, but in nationwide to bring more interest and awareness to the trades. So as Lisa says, because she's the one who's on the front line and seeing these things, we haven't had a huge dip. Um, had some changes in law, but it's remained consistent. But if you want something more specific, like a trend, is that something you would kind of like maybe to have for the next meeting for the last 5 or so years?
Yeah, if we could keep track of things. I know Texas is one of the largest growing states in the nation. And if we just keep steady, eventually we'll outpace ourselves and we'll be, people will be waiting days or weeks for an AC tech to come fix their stuff. I was just, are we keeping track with growth? And I think that trend that you're mentioning would help us track that.
That would be great. And I know RPM is out there working, and they're also boots on the ground in the trade and possibly can provide more insight. If not during their report at this meeting, they can have something for you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Dave, I can tell you that as a mechanical contractor, we've got a lot of contractors that are moving in here from out of state. A lot of them are coming in and trying to buy local contractors so they can buy a local presence. And as a union contractor, I know our at least our local union in Houston is really making a big push to try and get service techs and pipe fitters into the union. And we've enrolled way more than we have in the past, but we really were remiss in trying to refill the ranks from even back from the 80s when business kind of went to hell in a handbasket. So that's my 2 cents worth.
And thank you, Jimmy. I want to jump in here too and just add something. Mr. Yelovic, I am looking at a lot more out-of-state requests for licenses coming in. So when an out-of-state licensee from another state, California, Colorado, New York, whatever, they want to take our exam because we only have reciprocal with 2 states, and that's Georgia and South Carolina. But I'm seeing a lot more this year than I have before. So as folks are moving in, some of the air conditioning contractors, like Jimmy said, are moving in and are getting, I would say, double the request for me to review out-of-state licenses that I did before.
And that's what we're going to need. And I do agree. I've seen the unions picking up a lot of the training and recruiting, and that's been really good to see.
Thank you. Yeah, if you'll just scroll up, thank you. And then the last thing I want to touch on is the emergency extension update. I think Delia's going to share her screen. There we go. And Delia, if you can just click right there at the right there, yes. So the emergency license extension is for licenses that have expired on or after August 1st, 2020 and before or on September 18, 2021. And basically what this means is if someone has submitted a renewal to us and we haven't processed it yet for various reasons, we've had some backlog due to the pandemic. However, we're catching up, but the emergency license was allowed for people that have sent in the renewals and the renewal hasn't been issued yet. And this allowed them additional time up to 120 days after their expiration date to continue to work. It's not actually anything that we issue or print. It just gives the licensee additional time. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of this. And this information is, of course, on our website. That's what Delia just pulled up. Thank you, Delia. I appreciate that. And I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. That concludes my report.
Does anyone have any questions for Lisa? Okay, if not, we're going to move on to item 2, the Customer Service Division, and I would ask Ms. Dawn Robinson to give us her update.
Good morning, Advisory Board members and TDLR staff. My name is Dawn Robinson. I am one of the managers here in customer service. First I wanted to note Trey Seals was our former Director of Customer Service after 20 years of service with the state. 15 of those was with TDLR. He has decided to move on and pursue other endeavors. Our new Customer Service Director is Twan Nguyen. He has been with us for about 7 years, has an outstanding analytical background, and we're very excited to see how he's taken customer service forward in the future. Also, which is not listed on the agenda, is currently customer service. We're en route to hiring about 8 to 10 new CSRs. We've had a slight turnover, so we are in the process of replacing those CSRs. So there should be some new faces on the CSR roster pretty soon. As far as our statistics, our calls currently for 2021 are down from 6,200 to 2,400. Excuse me. Our emails are down from 6,200 to, I'm sorry. Let me start over. Our calls from fiscal 2021 are 22,362, which is up from 2020, 20,603, and our emails are down 2,477 from 6,202. If you have any questions, I'm here to assist. Thank you.
Good morning, Dave Yelovic again. I was just curious, in today's day and age, I find it interesting that the emails are so small versus phone calls. And I was wondering, is it easy for people to email, or I'm just curious if there's something to be said there.
One of the reasons, the emails that come directly to customer service, and then we have a set of emails that go to licensing. That may be part of the actual decrease. The emails that go directly to licensing has attachments such as experience verification forms, employment history, anything that's attached to the application. So that's where those emails are going directly to the licensing team. The other emails are coming directly to customer service. So that could be one of the reasons why there's been such a decrease. But yes, it's a little easier to send information via emails or contact us via emails than calls.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Dawn on the customer service division? Okay, if not, we'll move on to item 3, the enforcement division, and I'd like to ask Amanda Barrera to give us her report.
Good morning, board members. My name is Amanda Barrera, and I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. I do have a quick personnel update for you. Last month, we hired Cynthia Marple as an attorney 3. Cynthia comes to us from the Department of Public Safety's office and will be working on our transportation team. So today we'll be discussing fiscal year 2021 through the end of July. Last time we met on June 30th, I discussed fiscal year 2021 through the end of May, so it's going to be very similar. I'd be happy to go through those updated statistics if you'd like, or I can go straight into our sting operation and case highlights. Okay, I'll go ahead and jump straight to the sting operation, since the numbers are very, very similar from what I presented last time. Our hardworking investigation department conducted a sting operation in Houston between June 7th and June 10th in an effort to combat unlicensed ACR and electrical activity. As I mentioned last meeting, unlicensed activity is a very big part of our program here in the ACR program and in enforcement. Our investigators contacted people who advertised electrical and or air conditioning services with no licensing information on the ad. Investigators filed 22 enforcement cases against unlicensed ACR contractors who performed unlicensed work during the sting. It should be noted that the National Association of State Contractors Licensing Agency did a national press release that included information on our sting. Some quick case highlights for you. Our first case is regarding Mr. Jesus Vigil Cardona Jr., whose ACR technician registration was revoked by operation of law when it was discovered that he was in prison. So his license was automatically revoked, and he must now reapply for a new registration to determine if he meets all the necessary requirements and his criminal history check. The next 2 cases I have for you, again, demonstrate our unlicensed activity. Mr. Juan Carlos Robles Garcia and Mr. Ruben Gaetan. Mr. Robles Garcia installed an HVAC unit at a residence without being properly licensed. He was assessed a $2,000 violation, and he is currently on a payment plan and has paid $1,000 so far. Mr. Gaetan entered into a contract and was paid for the agreed upon work. He also listed another contractor's number on his invoice. So Mr. Gaetan did not respond to our notice of alleged violation and had a default order entered against him for $6,000. Our next case is regarding Mr. Christopher Joseph Barone. He failed to provide supervision of all the work that was being performed, and he was assessed a penalty of $1,500, which he has paid in full. Lastly, Mr. Christopher Marie, who had a default entered against him for $3,000 when he failed to provide proper service when the company serviced an air conditioning unit and damaged the drain pan, which caused the leak in the residence. Upon recent review, it appears Mr. Murray has worked with our general counsel and has paid that penalty in full. That's all I have for you today, but I'm happy to answer any of the questions.
Hey, Amanda, on the one that the guy was using somebody else's license number, was there any action taken against the guy, or did he use the other guy's license number without his permission?
It was without the other contractor's permission.
Okay.
So we did talk to that contractor. Any other questions?
If there's no other questions for Amanda, we'll move on to item 4, the Education Examination Division. And I call on Michael Strong to give us his report.
Good morning, members. My name is Michael Strawn. I'm the manager for Education Examination Division, and I'm here to give you our statistics for this reporting period. In front of you, you'll see our numbers. I know one of the members asked about the total number of individuals we have seeking a license in this state. I think the statistics for our exams kind of speak a little bit to that. As you'll see in fiscal year 20, we had 2,200 total exams that, for the year. Within fiscal year 2021, we've administered 23, almost 2,400 exams without August totals being available. Due to the nature of when this report was due, we were coming up to that. The pass rates are very similar within this time. By the time we have August filled out, we'll probably see that they're very, very close to each other. And if you scroll down a little bit more, we will see the individual comparisons here. Really, like, pass rate looked pretty solid, pretty comparable from each month. Quarter 3 was a little bit lower. I do not have an explanation as to why. It could have been people rushing in, trying to, so we have individuals that will come in just to try and take the test without preparing for a test. But we don't really have an explanation as to why quarter 3 tended to drop over what we've seen in the past. But we will keep looking into that and see if we have anything to report for you there. And if you'll go down a little bit further, onto the next page, we have our total courses approved and issued. Our total courses issued or approved for fiscal year 21 is slightly less. However, again, we have not reported for August. We suspect that will come up, but it will be a little bit less than we've seen for fiscal year 20 at this point in time. That concludes my report, and I'm open to any questions that you all have for me.
Michael, I've got
Michael,
a question. When was the last time that the contractor's license test was changed? Is it the same one that we've had for quite a while?
That's a great question, Michael Strawn, Education Examination. So we had put on hold due to COVID last year. The exam review committees, we do hold those pretty regularly, at least twice a year for most of our programs. We have resumed those this year, and we are going to continue. We have already started them back up with cosmetology, electricians, and we are scheduling all of the ones that have been put on hold. And we are looking at probably late this year, early next year, when we're going to resume ERCs for ACR. We'll have those exams reviewed. And at any point in time, I would point out that if we have an item, if we have individuals that are taking an exam, if they feel an item is incorrect or worded incorrectly, or there is no positive answer for it, they make a comment, and those comments and the exams are reviewed by the PSI staff monthly. We look at that, and if an item is miskeyed, if it is incorrectly cited, or whatever the case may be, if we go back and determine that some item was wrong, then those individuals could be given credit for that item. But we do routinely look at those exams and how each item is performing on those exams.
Right. And the test is still open book, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It just surprised me, if taking an open book test, that we only got 40% pass rate. So I didn't know whether we were continually making the test harder and harder, or maybe the people that are taking the test just really aren't qualified.
Well, Jimmy, I'll jump in here. The test is a little more robust than probably when you and I took it. And it's like there's no boiler law really in there like there was before, and a few other things. But I got to tell you, it's not an easy test. And if you look at everything that the test comes from, the technical part is modern refrigeration and air conditioning, and then we've got all the 8 ICC codes and the like the UMC. So actually, any paragraph in any book that we have, we can make a question out of. Now, I will say I sat in on those exam review committees, and all the answers are in the book. Okay, but it's a pretty tough exam, Jimmy. And I would, I've been in the business 40 years. I know you've been in the business a long time, but I would hate to sit down and take that test without the books. I may not pass it. It is pretty intense. So I just thought I'd throw that in there for you.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, not a day goes by that I don't have to read a code book, and just to try and find the thing you're looking for. I mean, takes forever, but you can eventually find it. But
Eventually find it.
Yeah, on a timed test, if you don't know exactly where to go in the code, yeah, I can see where it could be very difficult.
Mr. Graves, Mr. Weatherley is absolutely correct. I mean, the test is very comprehensive. Every item that is in there, when we talk about how it's keyed or it's cited, is reference to actual code, law, or a book that is officially used. And then it can be difficult. And sometimes with open book tests, we do see the individuals, even in their comments that they make to us, is that they come in the first time to kind of, they feel it's open book, they can pass it, and then they're not really prepared for it a lot of times. And that is something that we see that drives the pass rate down in a lot of these open book exams.
Michael, Dave Yelovic again. One, in today's world of, let's just say, Mr. Weatherly and myself, and let's just call us old school folks. Yes, the days of those types of tests are gone. I would hate to think that we are creating tests that exclude people that want to get into the trade, but maybe they're just poor test takers, or they just can't read 15,000 pages of text spread over numerous books to apply. Because like was stated earlier, just to find one answer, it could take you 30 minutes. You'll find it. But if that's the way we look at it, maybe we need to look at that in the future. But I was just curious. My question was, if the fail rate is so high, another thing maybe we haven't looked at, education in general. Have we looked at, maybe in the days of COVID, are we missing the boat? I know kids in school learning virtually, they say they're not learning as well as they do in classroom settings. In the day of COVID, could our downturn in Q3 be due to just the way education is being done? Have we looked at, how often do we audit certain providers as far as, are they meeting the task? If we had school systems with star ratings of 28 or 30%, those school systems would be under heavy scrutiny on the 10 o'clock news. But yet we come to these meetings and we see 20, 30, 40% people passing. We say, well, they just got to prepare better. So maybe I'll turn up the heat a little bit and say, hey, maybe we need to look at education and testing overall and see if we're meeting the needs of the people that want to get into this industry. Because we're failing somewhere if we got such low passing scores.
That's a good point. And do we provide like a practice test online that people can take to review before they take the test?
Michael Strawn, Education Examination. TDLR does not provide a practice exam at this time. But to answer Mr. Yelovic's questions, our exams are, each item is scored on an ANGOF rating. Difficulty is considered. But with your context about, how we look at the exam, how long it takes, those are all items that we will always take under advisement. We'll bring to our next DRC as well, and certainly always keep that under within the scope when we're developing and enhancing these items as we progress in this examination. It is comprehensive. It could be considered difficult, and you're correct on the education front. I don't have the statistics looking at the impact of COVID yet from who took a distance learning course versus who took an in-person course, the length of time between when they took those education and when they actually sat for their exam, and the correlation between that. We have seen direct correlations at times between in other industries where individuals are testing sooner, soon after their education, and their pass rates are higher. With this, we would really have to drive down and see if we have the data to tell who took what type of education and how it may correlate to their exam. That's something I can work with my staff on, and if we have it, we can hopefully be able to present it next time too.
All right, I appreciate that. I mean, I do get worried. I mean, I looked at people like Mr. Weatherley and Mr. Graves, who, you know, and for both of them to say, if they were to step in there and take the test today, they may have trouble with it. I'm concerned.
Well, this is Bill Weatherley, Air Conditioning Chief Inspector. There are a myriad of pre-tests out there, and you have to pay for them. It's private sector. They're classes, and mostly what these classes do, Mr. Yelovich, is teach the folks how to take the test, how to go to the table of contents, how to go, you know, look up the answers. Now, you're going to have some basic knowledge of air conditioned refrigeration, and that's what we want before you take the test, of course. But as far as, I agree with you as far as education, you know, there's not a whole lot we can do about the state of education as folks are coming up. Now, in outreach, I try to do as much as I can. I have talked to many air conditioning refrigeration schools, you know, a 1-year class or 2-year class. There's a lot of those out there that are accredited in colleges. I've done that in El Paso, and I look for that, you know. And one of the things that is coming up that I'm a little worried about is as the industry gets more efficient and the code is more stringent, we're looking closer at air conditioning contractors knowing how to do load calculations, manual J, right? Manual S for selection, and they're not doing that. They're doing rule of thumb in the residential industry, and so that concerns me. And so, you know, we are looking at that for public outreach. There's only so much we can do as far as the overall general education goes, but it's a good point you bring up. And what I'm seeing, if I go back and look at the folks that have failed the test, usually they pass it on the second time. I mean, it's like you run through one time, you understand how it's done, you come back the next time, you're a little more prepared. And so I think most of those failures are, you know, in the first time. But it is something that we'll always be looking at. Very good point.
Jerry Bittner, I've spoken to several people over the years who've taken these tests, and to a person, the one comment that I hear most often is the amount of time allocated for taking the test. As we all know, when we're searching code books and educational texts, technical manuals for reference answers, they appear oftentimes in multiple places in the various texts and documents, and they have to search between the air conditioning books and the code to try to find the right answer. And many of the folks that I've talked to just said if there was just a bit more time allowed for taking the test, they felt like they would have done better on the first go around.
Mr. Bittner, this is David Gonzales, Deputy Executive Director. This is such important conversation y'all are having here. Great discussion. And I just want to reiterate how important the exam review committee is to this process. When we put out a call for volunteers, because it is volunteer work for the subject matter experts, it is so important. If you have a stake in this matter, and all of y'all have brought up valid points, and we could go a lot of different directions on exploring why the pass rates are so low. It's important that we get those volunteers to participate and contribute and give us input on what should be included as part of the exam. The Angoff scores that Mr. Strawn was referring to, some of the psychometric terms we utilize, those are subject matter experts deciding on what would be a passing score for a particular question, rating that particular question, and making sure we come up with something that matches what their expectations are. Now, with that said, we've talked about a lot of different directions. Education. mentoring is such an important part of the trades. And if someone is going to be your future competition in the future as an air conditioning technician, is the air conditioning contractor putting in the time to train them, to put them in front of the books and the technical situations, or are they keeping them shielded? I would expect that they want good service, they want good technicians for troubleshooting and installations. They're going to actually train them on everything they need. But again, there's a balance that we find out in the actual industry on where that line is at. So there's a lot of different directions to go with this. I think it's very important that we continue this conversation. I see Ford raising his hand that the exam review committee again is so important to this process, and it's where the public can have an effect on how our exams are developed. And one more point I'll make is we do not do a practice exam because there are definitely many providers in the private sector that are in that particular industry and trying to help with the process. But we have a candidate information bulletin that tells the candidates everything that is going to be on the exam, all the references. It tells them the categories and sections that will be addressed. As Mr. Weatherley referred to, all the answers are in the book. So we definitely would not explore a closed book test. And we've actually been chastised in the past for having an open book test. But it is how it would be used in the real world. Mr. Graves, you even talked about how even today you still go to the code books to look things up because the codes change. That is probably I think the key point for most of the challenge here is keeping up with the codes. That's going to keep things efficient, effective, that doesn't affect our power grid, the manual J calculations. Those are things that may not have been done many years ago like they were supposed to. And we're catching up, I think, in this age, trying to make sure that everyone's doing the manual J and manual S calculations as they should have been years ago. So there is something we can address, and that is done through the exam review committee. And Ford, I'll turn it over to you.
So Michael Strawn, education examination. Mr. Bittner, you bring up a great point about the length of time that people take. And this is something that is done in combination with the exam review committee that you heard David speaking about, and a PSI. And we look at those total lengths of times and the averages people are taking, and we're actually seeing that they are not taking the full allotment of time. There are always the individuals, of course, that do, but the vast majority of them are not taking the full amount of time to complete the examination. That's something that we will certainly take under advisement, we will look at, and we'll continue to look at as we move forward. Thank you.
Bill Weatherley, Air Conditioning Program Chief. One of the things that was brought up is we need some volunteers, we need some help. We could use a couple more contractors on the subject matter expert list for our exam review. It's mostly made up now of educators from accredited colleges for air conditioning and refrigeration, and also a couple of municipal inspectors. We have one contractor that I was able to talk into giving us a little bit of time. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's usually maybe 2 to 3 days, once a year, sometimes twice a year. Now that it's virtual, it's a lot easier. You don't have to travel across the state, but we can really use some more subject matter experts in the exam review
Bill,
committee.
I'm sorry. Mary Winston, TDLR. I'm hopping in because I think, Mr. Bittner, that Mr. Weatherly has moved right on into that next agenda item because I believe he's up next. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, there you go. You
Yes.
gave your own introduction. So just keeping us on track. And
Thank you,
Bill,
Mary.
you started there. So if Mr. Bittner is good with it, we can move to that next agenda item.
I would like to move on to Mr. Weatherly's presentation, the Regulatory Program Management Division.
Well, good morning, all. Good morning, board members and staff. I'm William Weatherly. I go by Bill. I'm the Air Conditioning Chief Inspector and Program Specialist. I'll move right into personnel updates. And as most of you know, I am the department. Okay, I have no help right now, but we've been able to make it work. But approval has been received to post a program specialist for position that will assist the ACH, or our chief inspector, which is me. This position will perform many of the same duties as the chief inspector and will provide some much needed assistance with the subject matter expertise. That's what we're looking for industry inquiries and enforcement cases. And we hope to have this position posted on the department's website soon. Looking forward to that. With current activity, we'll talk about public outreach, which kind of dovetails into some of the things we're talking about. But the Texas Air Conditioning Contractors Association, go by TACA, their annual meeting today is going to be in Austin. They're calling it Air Conditioning Live. I put a little link there if you want to go in and look and just see what it's all about. I do have a slot, I think, on the last day. It's a 2-day event. On Friday, I'll be talking about air conditioning laws and rules. And I think it's open to members of TACA and also non-members as well. Also, the Bluebonnet chapter of the International Code Council has inquired about speaking at their monthly meeting. They're located in Harker Heights, and it's mostly inspectors and building officials from Central Texas area. It's tentatively the first week in October, and it's not for sure yet. But those couple of public outreach. Normal duties that I do, public inquiries concerning the ACR program and the sent from the customer service department. And these are usually emails that come from customer service. I know that was brought up a little bit before, but I'll respond to those. When I respond to them, I'll either call them if they want to call, or I'll send an email. I usually include the customer service specialist in at least the BCC. I want them to know the answer as well. Just a little more education for customer service. And then ACR license application reviews, mostly concerning out-of-state applicants. And we touched on this a little bit before. I'm seeing more of those this year than I have before. We try to give, everyone a chance. What I'm doing is trying to match up the Texas requirements, what the legislature says that are required to take the air conditioning exam. And sometimes I have to research those in depth. There are some states that don't have a state license. New York is one of them. They go by boroughs, and cities. So that takes some research, and I try to look at it and give them the leeway. If I really think that they have the experience, I'll dig deep and we'll come up with a way to help them do that. But unless they're from Georgia or South Carolina, they're pretty much going to have to take the exam as well to get licensed. So review of the ACR exam questions. That's what we talked about before. They were looking at the psychometrics, as David Gonzales had said. If there's a question that's in there that has only a 10% pass rate, we'll look hard at that question. Maybe it's too hard. Maybe we need to change it a little bit. If there's a 90% pass rate on that question, and that may be too easy. So we're looking at individual questions as well, and what to actually include out of the database to have on the license if it comes down. Then also review enforcement cases, especially the ones that have mechanical integrity issues. If we can hire an assistant for me, that'll help with that. I try not to let those back up, but they have been backed up a little bit. Some help will go a long way on that. And then industry updates. Talk about that. We talked about the National Electric Code last time. I don't think I need to get into it too much now, unless there's some questions. That to review, that was section 210.8. It was the GFCI breaker for the air conditioning condensing units and the problems there. So if there's any more questions on that, I'd be glad to talk about it. And then something that has come up over the time, I believe, since the last meeting, the Department of Agriculture, on a regional basis, decided that in the valley, they started, one of the regional investigators down there determined, they came up with the idea that air conditioning contractors sell refrigerant by the pound. Okay, it was just, epiphany, I guess. Of course, we've been selling refrigerant by the pound for the last 60, 70 years, right? But because of that, and they had a valid issue, state requires any commodity that's sold by the pound to be regulated. It is regulated by the Department of Agriculture. The problem was they came in blindsided with no warning, and they visited a couple of the contractors in the valley and told them that they were not in compliance. And these folks were upset. You know, they didn't know what to do, because you go online or you try to buy a refrigerant scale and it's not going to be a class 3 scale that is certified by the Department of Agriculture. So even trying to come into compliance with a scale that they could carry in their trucks and they could weigh refrigerant when we charge refrigerant, it was tough. Didn't know what to do. So with those inquiries that came to me, we looked at that, and then we actually had one of our folks informally call and talk to the Department of Agriculture and see if it was a statewide initiative. It turned out it wasn't, but it's something that they do want to analyze and decide what to do on that. So we kind of put that to bed. They backed off on that. The Department of Agriculture actually said no actions will be taken against the ACR contractor licensees, and we're going to sit back and evaluate this procedure going forward and what path will look like in the future. So on one hand, they have a good point. You know, we sell that commodity. If you're buying R22 now, if you still have one of the old condensing units out there that has R22, it's going to be well over $100 a pound. And so that's pretty expensive. And I understand the customer would want to know that they were fairly charged. So that is an issue that will probably come up in the future, but thankfully there will be some education and some forewarning, and we'll see how that goes. But, I think at least for now, we put that to bed, and it won't be something that's going to be a hardship for contractors, and at least until they have time to prepare. So unless there's any other questions, that is my presentation.
Mr.
Very good.
Bittner,
Thank you, Bill.
I'm
Excellent
sorry.
information.
Did someone
Yep.
have a question? I'm sorry, Mary Winston.
Dave Yelovic.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay. I was just curious. You had mentioned the 2 states that we have agreements with. And I was just curious, out of, so many states, our neighboring states that actually border us, is there some sort of criteria that, to get full reciprocity like that, are we just a tough state to meet a certain goal, or what goes into that, and why wouldn't some of our neighboring states be on that short list? You mentioned Georgia, and then there was one other one. I was just curious.
Georgia and South Carolina. This is Bill
Yeah.
Weatherley. And those are fairly
Close.
old
Yeah.
reciprocity agreements as well. They need to be updated, but they are still there, and makes it much easier. Now, Doug Jennings and I have been working on this for about a year, and we have touched base with Louisiana, and I think that's going to be the first one we're going to push hard to get a reciprocity agreement. And it makes sense too. Just think back to Hurricane Harvey, and all the weather that hits New Orleans and Louisiana over there. So that would make a lot of sense to have a contractor be able to easily be licensed in either state to come over and help during disaster and emergency. But it is on my agenda. It's my goal to have reciprocity with all our neighboring states to start with. And there's not a national push for that right now, like there is in the electrical trade. The electrical trade has a national push. They have an organization. They try to get reciprocity between states. And so, really good question, Dave, and something we're working on.
Is there some sort of checklist that we just go down and kind of score where they are versus where we are?
Mary Winston, TDLR. Doug, there's not like an actual checklist, but Doug, if you wanted to kind of speak to this a little bit before we move on, because as Bill has said, definitely this is something you guys have been looking into, and reciprocity is something that we of course are not, we're very open to, but typically it has to be sought, so, or requested. So Doug, did you have a little tidbit? I don't want to get us too far off the agenda, but if you wanted to kind of give Mr. Yelovic an update or something that he can maybe take forth.
Sure thing. Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel for the department. Typically with reciprocity agreements, we have other states reaching out to us. And actually, I hesitate to call it a reciprocity agreement. It's more like an exam waiver agreement. Because a true reciprocity agreement, of course, would be if you have a license in state X, come on into Texas and you get a license without any further kind of review. We are working on such an agreement with Louisiana right now. We haven't, I don't think we've been approached by any other neighboring states. We're certainly open to it. These agreements tend to, you know, they're pretty limited. Like I said, it's exam waiver. The person who comes over still has to have a, you know, a criminal background check and everything like that. Generally, the rule is as long as the industry is regulated in a substantially equivalent manner as Texas, that's, you know, that state will be eligible for that sort of exam waiver agreement. If not, we will still, of course, look at an out-of-state applicant's work experience. And if they have something that looks like ACR-related work experience, we will include that. We will allow that. The real question is just whether or not the person is required to take an exam.
Mr. Yelovic, is that helpful?
Yeah, it's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, good. Mr. Bittner, I know I'm poking in again, but I'm poking in because I want to get some information that Mr. Yelovic specifically requested and that Lisa Hodak has magically acquired. So it's the magic of technology and of staff and working hard. And Dee Dee McEachern, her director, is probably involved as well. But those statistics. So Lisa, if you wanted to pull that up to kind of give us a snapshot. Thanks, Delia. She's got it up on the screen.
Thank you, ladies. Yes, this is Lisa Hodak, licensing manager. And I quickly put together the last 10 years, and I did the population numbers on all of the different license types or registration certifications. So the first column, we've got the air conditioning contractors, and then the last 10 years. The air conditioning registration is the second column, and then the air conditioning certification is the last column. So I will let y'all look that over for a moment. And there was one difference, and I think I've got this date correctly. I know I've got general counsels listening. I know everybody's listening, but I believe it was September 1, 2019, I believe is when the, thank you, Doug. He shook his head, yes, is when the air conditioning certification changed. And that was a pretty big change, if y'all remember, because before they could apply by basically taking a course and then getting their certification. And the new requirement, they have to take an exam and then prove the years of experience. They could also apply online, and they cannot do that now either.
Thank
Any
you,
questions
Lisa.
on anything?
Okay, sorry. Sorry for interrupting, Mary Winston, but I wanted to say thank you, Lisa, for jumping in and getting that information. And if there aren't any questions at the moment, and you have questions later, and we can definitely, the rest of the information you've gotten in your packet. And since this was requested here and Lisa jumped to it and got it here, we'll make sure that we send these numbers out to the board members so they can have them just for future reference. And if you don't have any other questions, just going back to the agenda, we that was E1, and we finalized that part of the agenda now with responding to that request. And we are up to E6 if there are no further questions.
It's Jerry Bittner. I had one other question of Mr. Jennings with respect to the outreach on the, we call it reciprocity or waiver of exam. If I understood correctly, we have to wait for another state to reach out to us, and I'm wondering why we have to wait for that. It would seem to me that the interest of the state of Texas would be to ensure when we have a disaster or an emergency such as a hurricane, that we would be able to bring these other contractors in without a great deal of difficulty. And I was just curious as to why we felt as a state that we had to wait for someone else to reach out to us. Why can't we reach out to them?
Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel, and I'm sorry if I made it sound like we were just sitting and waiting for requests. I don't think that's the case at all. I think we have just been more active, I think, in outreach in our electrical program than we have in the air conditioning program. And I think part of the issue is, I think we just have so much work to go around that is just, it's one of those things that when a state reaches out to us, that issue is kind of on fire, and we'll look at it. We could do better for certain, and I think we will.
Mary Winston, TDLR, also wanted to add, in situations like that, our governor jumps in and there are emergency orders that come up, and that's a whole different process. That's really different than more of a reciprocity thing. But during an emergent time within the state, certain things are waived or allowed. That's a little above what we can as staff do. And our Deputy Executive Director has his hand raised, so I'll let him finish that off.
Deputy Executive Director David Gonzales. So, Mary, you're right on point. There are certain things we're able to do during emergencies that have allowed for those accommodations, including getting air conditioning technicians in quickly, because it's just a temporary license that you need, and with a background check to come in and get those workers to do this work. The competition, bringing in the competition, has been a little bit of a challenge, and you might expect, Mr. Bittner, Texas is a big state. You see our numbers rising. The idea that Louisiana air conditioning contractors and New Mexico contractors would appreciate us getting in there during a disaster declaration is appropriate, I think. I think they do want us there, but it's during regular times, or I'll even say hard times, like maybe during a pandemic, that the fear of the numbers and population of air conditioning contractors from Texas may be being too much, overwhelming the industries in the other states, that could cause a little bit of consternation on whether or not Texas would get it. It doesn't mean we should not be pursuing it, because that is something that we have been exploring for a while. But it is a challenge sometimes to try to make sure we're balancing what we're trying to achieve, which is services available, safety, and the installations and technical requirements. But this is, again, great conversation.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we move on to Mr. Gonzales on his report for the executive office.
So good morning, Mr. Bittner, presiding advisory board member, presiding officer Bittner, and advisory board members. I am David Gonzales, Deputy Director of Licensing Services. We'll try to be brief with the executive report, and I'll be addressing the 86th legislative session, while Ms. Mary will be presenting the communication outreach and statistics for y'all's webpage contacts. So the session, I think we reported to you, started out pretty slow. There was leadership changes, and they were trying to figure out how they're going to do their business. Things picked up pretty quick, and at one point we were tracking over 300 bills that had an effect on our agency somehow or some way. Of course, we had many of our staff assisting executive director in preparing for testimony at hearings. We also had to make trips to the Pink Building. We had to get tested regularly, wore our masks, maintain social distancing, all during legislative session. So we were keeping our legislators safe from the pandemic concerns, and ourselves. So all of the bills that have had effect on our agency can be found via a link on our main agency webpage, but that page has been updated recently. So if you haven't looked at it lately, if you didn't sign on previously for our email updates, I would encourage you to do so now. It's still in the same place. It says 87th legislative updates, but there's a new notice that's up there, and it has to do with 9/1. as of 9/1, there's been quite a few laws that went into effect. Not all of the laws that were passed went into effect on 9/1, but many of them did. The most significant for us, the one we were tracking and keeping our fingers crossed, was our sunset bill, House Bill 1560, which basically allows our agency to continue in existence. I am pleased to report that we were continued in existence for another 12 years. I think we said that at the last meeting, but it's key and it's important because there was a lot of different requirements in that bill, other things that we have to do and administer and implement. And that process requires y'all's participation, the public's participation. There's a lot of rules that have to be developed, a lot of communications that are going to be going out, have been going out for some of our programs, to let the public know what bills have gone into effect and which ones require some action on their part or some new requirement on their part. The only bill specific to ACR that I can recall, and Mr. Weatherley, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the air conditioning industry was affected by House Bill 871, also on our website, which prohibits municipalities from charging air conditioning and refrigeration contractors a registration fee to work in the municipality. So that was another one of those bills that was affecting the ACR industry that for us, it's a communication aspect, getting the information out, but it's really at the municipal level that this work happens. And we are going to continue to be curious now that 9/1 has come and gone, how those things are being addressed at the municipal level. I'm sure Mr. Weatherly has some insight on some of those changes, but every city does things differently with their fees and permitting. It specifically says can't do a registration fee. It doesn't say they can't charge fees altogether. And so I'm just curious, and we will be finding out how every city will be addressing these matters going forward. I think we reported last time that the legislative session is an all hands on deck effort for us here at TDLR, and we have lots of key staff helping. But after the session ends in May and we get our small breather in June, we're back up and running with bill implementation teams, is what we refer to them as. And these teams are made up of key staff from across every division within our agency. We try to get the players that have had some interest maybe in the programs, have shown some abilities and creativity and being able to review statute and rule. And it's one way that TDLR develops the bench strength by pulling these participants from different divisions and getting their perspective. We have about 20 plus bill teams working on the many bills that have been implemented and passed. And those bill teams are working on the communication plans, the rule drafts, all the things associated with implementation of a statute. Of course, they work with the advisory boards as necessary and the work groups in those advisory boards as necessary when we need feedback and input from the industry and the industry participants. Sometimes we coordinate summits when it's a significant issue that requires communication. We will travel the state or virtually conduct a summit to gather input on things that may be different, and we may be looking to poll the public that we serve in order to find out what direction we should go with particular bill implementation requirements. In all efforts that we do, we're trying to be as transparent as possible and inclusive as possible. So the things that we do, the best way you can keep track of it, and hopefully I'm segueing to Ms. Winston's portion of the report, is to get on our website, sign up for that listserv so that you can get these notices. That change to our webpage and the information that went out is going to be easier if you're getting an email from us when those changes happen. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but I was trying to be as brief as possible. Miss Mary, anything I should have mentioned that I didn't?
David, I think we covered everything.
Okay.
I wanted to just, for this last section of E6 Executive Office Report, just going over our snapshot of community engagement via our web system. And over the past 6 months, from March 1st through August 31st of this year, the Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Contractors website has received almost 215,000 views for an average of over 1,100 views per day. Delia's screen wants to share. It's taking a minute to share, but I'll continue. 42% of those visitors access the site from a desktop computer. 56% did so from a smartphone. That is a statistic that changes and varies dependent on which industry or profession that we're meeting and gathering these statistics for. One that does remain consistent is that 2% from a tablet. That number is always typically pretty small. The top reasons for visiting our site for ACR contractors, how to apply for a contractor license, exam information, how to apply for a technician certification, forms, and how to apply for technician registration. Just a snapshot to let us know if the information we're providing is relevant and really what our public and licensees are looking for. If there are no other questions, we would move on at this time to agenda item F. Mr. Bittner, if that so pleases you.
Yes, I'd like to call on Mr. Jennings to discuss item F, the discussion and possible recommendation of proposed amendments to an existing rule.
Thank you, Mr. Bittner. Again, Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel for the department. As you'll recall, at our last meeting, this board voted to recommend the publication of a amended rule, and I will share that on the screen. All right. So you'll see this is what the board approved last time, a change to Rule 75.100 that states here in the section I'm highlighting that notwithstanding subsection A4, which requires work to be performed in compliance with the National Electrical Code, compliance with section 210.8F of the 2020 NEC is not required until January 1st, 2023. And as you'll recall, we have taken this recommended action in light of some concerns we have about equipment compatibility between air conditioning and heating equipment and the new GFCI requirements on outdoor outlets imposed by the 2020 NEC. Since our last meeting, we haven't become aware of any additional safety concerns. Again, last time during the presentation, we stated that our program experts have concluded that this does not negatively impact the health or safety of Texans. We've also seen several other states take similar actions. Also, our commission has taken emergency action to adopt this very same text that you're looking at right now. And that emergency authorization, that emergency change is set to expire in late November. So what we're doing, just as a reminder, is to put this in the permanent rules, and that will take effect the day after the emergency rule expires, just so we have this rule text in place on an emergency basis and on a continuing basis. And once again, we plan on keeping eyes on this issue. If new developments, if new equipment becomes available quickly, we can always repeal this section and require strict compliance with the 2020 NEC. If not, then this provision will stay in place until the next revision of the NEC, and we'll see where to go from there. Since the board cannot actually vote on this issue today because of quorum issues, just wanted to put this before you. Here, the plan is, since this advisory board recommended publication at its last meeting, this was published. We received two very short comments in support of the rule change. We have not become aware of any additional objections or any health or safety concerns. So the plan will be to carry this as it appears before you to our commission at their October 5th meeting to ask for them to adopt this rule change on a permanent basis. And so that's the current plan. If there are any questions or any objections, we could certainly talk about that, but we just can't take action as a board to vote today.
Does anyone have any additional questions on that item before we move on? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to item G, which is any recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting. If there's no recommendations for agenda items, do we want to talk about the time, date of the next board meeting? Which is item H.
If possible, Mary Winston, TDLR. Doug's talked about the next steps for this one change regarding the NEC. And Doug, I'm not aware of another matter that is pressing for us to meet within the next 30 days or so, correct?
That's correct. Again, Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel. There are no strict deadlines right now. So I think probably the best strategy would be to poll the members about their availability in a few months. If something comes up, we can certainly accelerate that process, but nothing pressing right now. Thank you.
And Mary Winston, again, as always, we've had really great conversations today about several issues. And as always, if there is an issue or topic that you would like to bring forward in the next meeting, if you don't have it at this moment, that's fine. But you can always email us at advisory.boards@tdlr.texas.gov as an agenda item request. And so don't feel pressured if we've discussed everything and you can't think of anything just right this second. So as well as polling of the board for the future, we didn't have a quorum this time. That happens, but we'll reach out in plenty of time before the next meeting to try our best to ensure a quorum.
Very good. I guess with that, we'll move on to item I, which is adjournment. This meeting then will be adjourned. Thanks for everybody that attended today, even though we didn't have a quorum. And for the record, the time is 11:14 a.m. Thanks, everyone.